The year is 2020. There's a pandemic spread across the entire world and schools are closed. Now, there's not much I have to say here. We all remember how it was. We all remember what happened when we did those online lessons. We all remember muting our mics, literally not doing anything the entire day, and if the teacher gave us an assignment, we would find some way to cheat or some way to do it the last minute. What I'm trying to say here was that COVID stunted a lot of people's study. It stunted a lot of people's ability to learn. One of those people happened to be me. I was never the best in my class at that time, but COVID made me somehow worse. I remember I was 12 years old, and all day I'd scroll on YouTube 24/7, and maybe at the end of a day do some type of work. It was also the time I started to do some of those bad habits that would scar my life forever. Let's just say it almost turned me into an incel. Now, 2020 was my third year of middle school. In Italy we have middle school, obviously. In England, I know you don't, you just have primary and secondary school. I'm no expert. I think it's year 8, third year of middle school. And we're back at school. And let me just remind you, I went and in the entire second semester of year 7 barely doing anything. If I studied for a test, I studied it last minute, and if I had to do homework, most of the time I wouldn't do it, or I'd find a way to cheat. So how do you think my year 8 went? I'll let you guess. It went brilliant. I was top of my class. You're probably asking yourself, how the hell is that possible? Well, I'll tell you one thing. Italian school is very complicated. It's just a lot of studying, a lot of memorizing, and I wasn't really ever good at that. But ever since the pandemic, I'd kind of taught myself to do it. And how exactly I would do it was, I'd literally leave everything last minute and then just memorize everything for 1 hour, and then I get like a 9. And that's the reason I literally believe Italian school is corrupt. The amount of time I saved by just being unproductive is criminal. And occasionally there would be that moment where maybe I wouldn't get a 9, I'd get like a 7 or a 6, which for me wasn't that good, but despite that, those were kind of exceptions. Most of the time, I'd get a high mark, barely studying. Now, this all went well until it reached a certain point. The year was 2022, and I had to study for a science test. I remember getting back home and I was very relaxed because it was a very easy test. It was just a couple of science exercises you had to do, of like basic math formula, and then a couple of theory questions where you kind of had to barely study for. So, what did I do? I grabbed my phone, started scrolling on TikTok, and not only that, I started editing little videos to post on TikTok. Now, this was a time I was literally addicted to that app, which fortunately I don't have anymore. And I'd sometimes occasionally make these little skits I'd do to kind of make my friends laugh. It was a way to seek attention, really. So I was making these videos, and it kind of took me 1 hour to make these videos, and you know what I did as soon as I finished? I started scrolling again. Then I closed my phone, I closed the app, went on Instagram and started scrolling on Instagram. Went on YouTube and started watching a YouTube video. Then, at 9 o'clock in the evening, I opened the textbook and started reading. 5 minutes in, I closed the textbook. It was too easy. I just had to kind of do a small revision the day after during break time. I would have gotten a high mark anyway. Who cares? The very next day, I did the test. You know what mark I got? 3. The lowest mark I had ever gotten in my life. A 3. I cried. For the first time since like I was 8 years old. In 2022, at the age of 14, I cried. It was the most humiliating mark I'd ever gotten in my life. But then self-improvement happened. I discovered a couple of people on this platform, and I started improving my life in almost every spectrum, and part of that included school. The year is 2024. I've taken around 4 to 5 science tests this year, and in all 5 tests I've gotten at least a 9. Think of that. I got 3 times the result, 5 different times. And all this because I started to organize myself and I started to use an actual study plan, a timetable that has gotten me to be one of the best students in my whole school. So, today in this video we are going to discuss different techniques, different methods, different hacks, if you want to call them that, which will get you to be one of the best, if not the best, student in your school. I had to take a break there, mostly because I had to get something from downstairs and show it to you people. The first bit of advice I have for you is to not study last minute. It's something I hope you've already understood from hearing about my story. And the reason why studying last minute is never the answer is because although most of the time it can actually help you remember everything and keep it fresh in your head, most of the time it will lead you to taking time off of your sleep or other activities you have during the night. For example, I remember a lot of nights, especially in year 8 and year 9, I would study until, let's say, sometimes almost midnight. And the very next day I would just be exhausted. Now, this year, I think year 11 in English school, I have actually made it so that I'm never studying past 10 o'clock when I go to bed, except maybe some rare cases which barely happen because I'm usually well organized. I'll give you an example of something that happened this year. I received a message from one of my classmates asking me to go on an oral test which I had scheduled on another day because one of the people who had to go on that oral test that day couldn't make it. And so it was the day before and I started studying at 6 p.m. I finished studying at 11 o'clock, which is something I never do. And what happened? Very next day, I was exhausted. I felt sick, and okay, I got a good mark, I got a 9, but the next 2 days I had to take days off because I just felt off of it. I couldn't go to school. So, what is important to learn here is to never study the night before. Dedicate the night before to revision. Dedicate the morning to revision, but never to actually study. So, by the day before, you already have to have all the notes ready. You already have to know what you're studying, you already have to pretty much know everything you're going to talk about or do the test about. And you just need that night of revision to kind of remember maybe the difficult words and fixate some of the concepts in your head. Second thing I have for you is to create a schedule. So this isn't exactly a schedule, but I have this here. Actually, there is a schedule here. I forgot about it. I have a schedule here about how I manage my school days and my free days, which is a Sunday, and I'll talk about the Sundays later on. So let's start with the work days. I wake up at 6:30. I have my morning routine, which is pretty complicated. It's made up of like a cold shower, meditation, gratitude journaling. But I'll get into that maybe another time. And then I have a so-called Eat the Frog task, which if you watch certain self-improvement YouTubers, you probably have already heard about. And it technically consists of doing one of the hardest, if not the hardest, task of your day in the morning so that you get it out of the way. Then I go to school until 2:30. I have my lunch break, and at 3:30 I start doing my homework. So from 3:30 until 6 p.m. I do 2 hours and a half of hard work, and then I go to the gym later on. I take the dog out, and I dedicate the last 2 hours of my day before going to bed to just relax, read, and not work, dedicate myself into relaxing and then into sleeping. So in that whole schedule, I dedicate myself, let's say, around 3.5 hours in doing my homework and in studying for potential tests. Now, I've got to say, sometimes it's, even in 3 hours and a half, it's pretty hard to study for a whole test. So, I usually try and use my 3 days, which for me is just a Sunday. For you, it should be a Saturday and a Sunday, in studying. So, for Sundays, I have my morning routine, and then from 8 o'clock, let's say, around, until midday, where I start doing my workout. All those hours are dedicated in doing my homework, so that's around 4 hours of hard work. Then, usually, later on, I'll have a football game to watch, but that would still kind of leave you with, let's say, 1 or half an hour in studying. So Sunday you should have at least 4 hours. That's why I think it's very important to start studying in a Sunday. Get maybe some of the hard work, some of the harder Eat the Frog tasks to do on a Sunday, so you get them out of the way, and it helps you a lot throughout the week. Now, next thing I wanted to talk about was about breaks. So, what I think is very important is to take breaks. I believe that humans in general, no matter how intelligent, no matter how hardworking, can't go more than 1 hour and a half working without breaks. I think a flow state lasts maximum 1 hour and a half. I'd say between 45 minutes and an hour and a half. So between a flow state task and another, it's important to take a break. But what is also extremely important is that in this break, you do not use your phone. For some, it may seem ludicrous. For some, it seems normal, but don't even touch it. In these breaks, you should mainly just breathe, look at your surroundings, be present, maybe read a book, but absolutely do not use your phone. I took an art test around February, and guess what mark I got? I got a 9. And it was the highest mark in the class. I asked my friends how they studied for the test. And almost every single person I talked to had studied more than me. I asked them, how many hours did you study? And most of them, they said, 4-5 hours. It was very hard. I spent the entire Sunday studying. And for that test, I literally spent, I think, 1 hour and a half studying. It took very little time of my Sunday. And I got a 9. I got the highest mark. And I studied the least. And this is just one example, but it's happened many times where I've asked my friends how much they studied, and they studied more than me and got a lower mark. And my conclusion is that when they say 5 hours, those 5 hours are literally 1 hour. Those 5 hours are literally 1 hour of work and 4 hours of countless breaks where they just scroll on their phones, and maybe they just go on TikTok. They say it's just going to be 1 minute. That 1 minute becomes 5 minutes. Those 5 minutes become 10 minutes, and they don't even realize it. So I think it's fundamental that when you work, your phone should be out of the room, unless maybe if you need it, or if you're just used to it by now, you're used to not using it, maybe you can have it in your room. But if you're used to just having it there as a distraction, just get out of the room. Don't touch it. It's a massive distraction. And if you're taking a break, which I think is very important, do not even look at it. Breathe purposefully, acknowledge your surroundings, maybe speak to someone if he's in your house, maybe read a book, but absolutely do not touch your phone. Finally, I wanted to talk about flow state. I think that another reason why I study less than everyone else and get the higher marks is because the study I do is purposeful study through a flow state. Now, a flow state is that long period of time where you're working, you don't have any thoughts, or you do have thoughts, but they're very limited. You don't have any annoying song playing in your head. And most of all, you do not acknowledge the fact that you're studying. You're just studying. Now, most of the time, before I ever got into self-improvement, this only happened maybe if I had a very hard test and I was in my fight or flight mode, where I knew that if I wasn't working hard, I'd fail, and so I was trying my best to work hard. Now, I think it's very important to start working in a flow state when doing homework at home, because it helps you get through a lot of stuff in a shorter period of time, and it helps you be less distracted. Now, for me, I'm a morning person, so for me it's a lot easier to get into a flow state during the morning, but some people are night people. In that case, I guess it's easier for you to do it in the afternoon or in the night time. And so maybe in that case, I think it could be better for you to actually dedicate your evenings in studying if you actually are a night person. But I wouldn't recommend it as a morning person, because I just feel as if the morning is a lot more relaxed. So, to get into this flow state, all you have to do is just start working, and it's kind of like do what you would do in a meditation. Every time a thought appears, just acknowledge it and get back to your work. Focus on your work. What I like to do is just focus on the words, on the letters that I'm writing, and then at one point you should just get into that flow state. Every thought should just kind of evaporate, and maybe you will get a thought every now and then, but just acknowledge it and get back to your work. I'm not an expert in flow state. There are definitely people out here in this platform who are better informed than me, so I suggest watching a video if you are interested in learning about flow states. A couple of more things I have to talk about. So here I just wanted to show, this is a program of every single task I plan for the day after regarding homework. I usually do this before going to bed, and what I do is I plan the day after and I write every task which I must do, and at the end of the day I rank the day based on how many tasks I've done and based on how satisfied I feel at the end of the day. It also helps you keep track on how well you're doing, if you're being consistent or not, and overall I think it's a very useful tool. I even have to update it once I've finished the first piece of paper, and make it kind of more like a game, so it's kind of fun to see how well you're doing each day. You have like an entire score based on different factors, and it's just really fun, and I can't wait to do it. And it's a great way to make your self-improvement journey a lot more exciting, a lot more fun, and a lot more dopaminic. The last piece of advice that I have is to try and get your homework done at school, or at least trying to get most of your work done at school. What this means is try and maybe get all of the notes for studying, all of the exercises done within the hour of that lesson. For example, you have to get your history notes written down so it's easier to study. Try and get them all down during the lesson. Bring your textbook, bring your notebook, take notes, and open the book, write what's written down in the book. If you have any questions, ask the teacher, and obviously listen to what the teacher is saying as well, which could be very useful to getting that extra mark when he tests you. In another case, if it's maybe a maths lesson, try and get your maths homework done during the lesson. Try and exercise yourself during the lesson so that if you have any difficulties, you can obviously ask the teacher, and you can do a bit of practical exercise instead of just listening all the time. And a lot of people, maybe yourself, are definitely gonna say that this is strange, because obviously if a teacher sees you not really listening to him, just doing your own thing with your notes, obviously he's gonna get angry. But I'll tell you one thing. Chances are you probably don't even listen during class. You probably just listen 5 minutes and then your mind just wanders off, and then you acknowledge that you try and concentrate, but then after 2 minutes you're thinking about something else again. Especially if the teacher just explains they're having like a PowerPoint presentation you can follow. So I think that if you have a textbook and you take notes from that textbook, it helps you stay focused, and it also helps you listen to the teacher as well, instead of just having your own thoughts and being unproductive during the hour. So I believe that not only does it help you listen to what the teacher says, it also helps you do a lot of the work that you usually do at home in class. Then if you have lunch breaks, which I don't have, but chances are you could have them, try and get your work done in those lunch breaks as well. I usually try and do it in my lunch break, so that maybe I can leave those 2.5 hours I have in between 3:30 and 6 before I go to work out, to do work which I prefer doing, more individual stuff, maybe about my hobbies and such, which I think is very useful. So I've given the advice which I think could be very helpful, and I hope this video has helped. Keep a strong mind and stay like a lion.